The broken air. The royal hall of Zalvera was shining with gold light. Alien banners moved in the soft wind. The throne room was full of voices, tall warriors and noble families from across the galaxy. Every prince had come to see her. Every suitor had been promised riches, ships, and glory. But none of them stayed. She sat alone now, in a silver hover chair, her legs thin and unmoving. Her arms rested on the sides, quiet and still. Her eyes watched each alien male walk away. Her name was Princess Jira, the last blood heir of the Empress, and not a single male had asked to claim her. A voice echoed in the hall. "Is there no one left?" The royal speaker looked around, nervous. Guards shifted. Nobles whispered. The answer was clear. No one wanted the broken heir. Jira lowered her head. Her long silver hair fell across her shoulder. A scar ran from her, neck down her back hidden beneath silk. Her body had been crushed in the Battle of Horus IV. She survived, but not whole. Since then, no suitor dared to bond with her. In their eyes, she was weak, useless. Half a queen. The Empress stood beside the throne, her face cold. She said nothing. She didn't need to. Her silence was a blade. Suddenly, a voice from the corner of the room spoke, not loud, not sharp, just calm. "She is not broken." All eyes turned. A human stood at the edge of the hall. Not in royal armor, not in noble robes. He wore plain dark clothing, dusty boots, and a small bag over his shoulder. The guards moved to stop him, but Jira raised one hand. For the first time in hours, someone obeyed her. "Let him speak," she said softly. The human stepped forward. He was younger than most of the suitors, his skin tanned, his hair dark, his eyes calm. He didn't bow. He didn't stare. He just walked until he was 10 steps from her. "Why are you here?" asked the Empress. "I was invited as an observer," he said. "But I stayed because no one else did." The room went quiet. Jira looked at him. Really looked. No fear in his eyes. No disgust. No pity. Just truth. "What do you see?" she asked. He smiled a little. "I see someone who survived what others couldn't. Someone still breathing when most would have given up. I see a queen." Her heart jumped. Not because of the words, because no one had called her that in a long time, and meant it. A voice growled from behind. One of the noble sons stepped forward. A tall alien with golden armor and a voice like thunder. "You dare insult our ceremony? You think she's worthy of a human?" The hall roared with anger, but the human didn't flinch. "No," he said. "I think she's worthy of herself." He looked at Jira. "And I think no one's ever asked you what you want." She stared at him, shocked. He was right. Not once had she been asked that question. The Empress raised her hand. Silence fell again. "You are not one of us," she said. "You will leave now. Your words mean nothing here." The human nodded, but before he turned to go, he looked at Jira one last time and said something no one in that hall had expected. "If no one else will ask it, then I will." He took a step closer. "Princess Jira, will you mate with me?" Gasps exploded in the air. Guards stepped forward. Nobles shouted. Jira's hands trembled, not because she was afraid, but because her heart had never felt so loud. The Empress shouted, "Enough! Remove him." But before they could reach him, Jira lifted her voice, clear and strong. "Stop." They froze. She turned her chair toward the human. Her eyes were glassy. Soft. "Why?" she asked. He smiled again. "Because when I looked at you, I didn't see a chair, or legs, or titles. I saw you." And in that moment, Jira whispered something no one expected. "Then stay." Buntur, the one who stayed. The hall was empty now. Only the echo of angry voices remained. The guards had dragged the human away. The nobles had stormed out in rage. The Empress had walked away in silence. But Jira sat alone in the middle of it all, and smiled. Not because she won anything, not because things had changed, but because, for the first time, Someone had stayed. Far below the palace, in a dark cell beneath the stone walls, the human sat alone. His name was Elian. His hands were tied. His head ached from the strike of the guard staff. The cell was damp, cold, and lit by a single blue light. Yet he smiled, because in his memory her voice echoed, "Then stay." And he had. Up above, the Empress stood before her high council. "He insulted our blood," one of the elders growled. "A human? Mating with the air?" Spat another. "The people will riot." "She must be reminded of her duty," the Empress said coldly. A plan was forming in her mind, not to kill him. Something worse. Jira wasn't allowed near Elian. They told her he had been taken back to his ship, that he had left quietly. They lied. But Jira had learned long ago how to move without being seen. She had no legs, but she had maps, codes, and her chair moved with perfect silence. That night she followed a tunnel behind the palace library. An old servant tunnel once used by messengers. It led deep into the cold belly of the fortress. She reached the cell and saw him, bruised but still awake. "You're real," he said with a weak smile. "They told me you were gone," she whispered through the metal bars. He laughed. "They said the same about you." She reached through the bars and touched his hand. He held it gently, not like he was helping her, like he needed her too. "Why did you ask that?" she said. "Mate with me?" He looked into her eyes. "Because I wanted to be the first person in your life who saw you and didn't walk away." Her throat tightened. She had faced wars, pain, and silence, but never words like those. Suddenly, loud footsteps echoed down the tunnel. She pulled her hand back. "Go," he said. "No," she answered, but he shook his head. "If they find you here..." The wall behind them opened, a hidden door, and her old mentor stepped out. Lady Silva, one of the Empress's spies. But tonight, she wasn't here to report. "Quickly," Silva said. "Both of you. Now." They ran, her chair gliding silently, Elian limping beside her. Silva led them through twisting tunnels past sleeping guards and forgotten gates. Finally, they reached a small chamber lit by soft green light. Silva closed the door and sealed it behind them. "What is this place?" Elian asked. "My last loyalty," Silva replied. She sat them down and showed them a recording. On the screen, a younger Jira appeared. Before the accident, before the war, she was laughing, walking, and beside her, a young alien male, her first suitor. They had been in love, but he betrayed her, not by leaving, but by causing the explosion that shattered her legs. Jira stared at the screen in silence, then whispered, "Why show me this?" "Because the Empress never told you," Silva said. "Because she wanted you to believe no one would ever want you again." Jira closed her eyes. The storm inside her heart was rising. Elian stood up. Then it's time she heard a different story. Hours later, the palace was silent again, but in the secret chamber below, Jira took off her royal robe. She looked in the mirror, not at her legs, not at her scars. But at her eyes, they weren't weak, they were full of fire. She turned to Elian. "You still want me?" she asked. He didn't laugh. He didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said. "I want all of you. Not the throne, not the crown. You." They held hands, and together, they made a plan. In the shadows, a drone watched them. The Empress watched the recording. She said nothing for a long time, then whispered to herself, "So, the broken heir wants to fight." A question no one asked. The palace prepared for the dawn ritual. 1,000 nobles filled the sky platforms. The ceremony was ancient, broadcast to every world of the empire. This time, it was not for a coronation or a bonding. It was for a warning. Princess Jira would be placed under silent loyalty, a cruel tradition used on heirs who disobeyed royal command. She would lose her title, her name, her right to choose. The Empress smiled as she watched her council. Prepare. They had already edited the broadcast. No one would know Jira had spoken out. No one would remember her. But someone had other plans. Hidden inside the walls of the broadcast tower, Elian moved silently with Silva. They had stolen a guard's badge. We have 3 minutes, Silva said. After that, the jammer resets. Elian didn't speak. His eyes were locked on the broadcast feed. He wasn't just going to speak to the council. He was going to speak to the entire galaxy. Meanwhile, Jira sat in the Hall of Stars. Her arms were tied to the hover chair. A white veil covered her head, symbol of silent loyalty. Nobody looked her in the eyes, not even the Empress. She felt cold, not just outside, but inside. Was this how it would end? A girl in a chair, forgotten? The drums began. The high priest raised the decree. The camera drones floated in, and just as he spoke the first word, the broadcast changed. All across the Empire, screens glitched, nobles gasped, technicians panicked, and then Elian appeared on every screen. He stood in front of the throne room, eyes calm, voice strong. Citizens of the Empire, he said, I know you don't know me. I'm human. I'm not one of you, but I have something to say. People leaned in spaceports, in ships, in the deepest colonies. They listened. You were all told that Princess Jira is broken, he said. That she is weak, unfit, unwanted. He looked into the camera. But you're wrong. Behind him, the screen showed secret recordings. Her surviving war, helping refugees, teaching children even when her legs no longer moved. You think, strength is in muscle and war, Elian continued, but real strength is what she has. It's waking up in pain every day and still choosing to be kind, still choosing to lead, still choosing hope. The feed shook. The Empress roared for the guards. But Elian had already spoken the words that would shake the stars. He stepped aside and Jira appeared beside him, not in a veil, not in a throne, just a girl in her chair. But her eyes, they were fire. Elian looked at her, and in front of the galaxy he asked, Jira, will you mate with me? The world stopped. Every voice, every breath, every thought, stilled. Jira's lips trembled, not with fear, with power. Yes, she said, her voice clear, her words free. I will. Back in the hall, the Empress stood up. Kill the feed. But the people had already seen it. And once truth is seen, it cannot be unseen. Rebellion didn't start with fire. It started with a question. Question no one ever dared to ask. Until now, in the outer colonies, workers removed the Empress's banners. On neutral planets, leaders asked for peace talks with the girl who rose. In private messages, families whispered, if a human can see her worth, why can't we? But the palace didn't stay quiet. A new order was given, a bounty on Elian's head, dead or alive. Jira knew the danger, and when they returned to their secret chamber, she didn't hesitate. We don't run, she said. Elian looked at her with concern. They'll come for us. Let them, she answered, because next time, I'll be ready. Far away in the dark corners of space, mercenaries received their orders. Some laughed, some trembled, because their target wasn't just a human anymore. She was the heir they tried to silence, and she had answered the galaxy with one word. Yes. A bond denied. The royal palace trembled, not from an attack, but from something more dangerous, something more silent. The broadcast had ignited a spark, and now, that spark was a fire. Across the Empire, people whispered her name. The broken princess. The human's choice. The rebellion they had feared. Back in the palace, the Empress's fury was a storm. She paced in her private chambers, her voice like ice as she spoke to her advisors. How dare they defy me, she hissed. She is a symbol. She was never meant to lead. The room was silent. But now she has a following, one advisor said quietly. The people are listening. Then we must end this, the Empress replied, before it spreads. Meanwhile, in the hidden chamber where Jira and Elian stayed, the reality of what they had begun was sinking in. They were no longer just a girl and a human in love. They were fugitives. Elian sat beside Jira, his hands folded in front of him. He knew the danger. He knew what it would cost them. But his eyes, they were still calm. We can run, he said softly. We can leave and disappear somewhere beyond their reach. But Jira shook her head, her eyes blazing with fire. No, running has never been an option for me. They want me to hide, to break, but I'm not like them. The tension between the two worlds grew with each passing hour. The rebellion spread, but so did the Empress's soldiers. And soon, it was no longer a matter of if they would strike. But when that night the first blow came, a knock on the door, soft at first, then louder. Open up, princess, a voice called, but not with respect. It's time to make things right. The door slammed open, and standing there were not the palace guards. No, they were mercenaries, hired killers, silent, cold-eyed men and women, their weapons drawn, and their eyes scanning the room for the one thing they needed, her. They moved fast, too fast. But Jira didn't flinch. She was no longer the helpless princess locked away in her room. She had learned to lead, to command. And as the mercenaries moved closer, she stood, her legs still weak, but her spirit stronger than ever. Move, she said to Elian. Get to the back, now. He hesitated, but only for a second. They were here for her, for both of them. The fight was brutal. The human was quick, dodging blows, using his fists, his wits. But they were outnumbered, and Jira was forced to fight with what she had left, her mind. She wasn't like them. She didn't need to be. She controlled the room, the air, and the force around her. Her power wasn't in her legs, but in her heart. With a series of swift, calculated moves, Jira disabled the last mercenary. Her eyes locked with Elian's. We can't stay, she said breathlessly. They won't stop. They'll never stop until we're broken. But as they turned to leave, a figure appeared in the doorway, the last person she expected. You, Jira whispered. It was her father. The Emperor stood tall, his regal robes flowing, his eyes cold as stone. You disappoint me, daughter, he said. And you, human, you're worse than I imagined. Elian stepped forward, ready to fight. But Jira held up her hand. No, she said, her voice steady but fierce. This isn't your battle anymore. It never was, the Emperor replied. You are mine, Jira. You are not free. None of you are. You will both return with me, or I will have you both dragged back. The room was silent. Jira stood, her ground. No, she said again. I won't go back. Not as a prisoner. Not as your pawn. The Emperor's eyes darkened. You have made your choice, and now you will pay for it. He raised his hand, and the door behind them opened. The soldiers, the mercenaries, poured in, but before they could act, Jira moved. Fast. She raised her hand, and for the first time, the storm inside her raged. A shock wave of energy exploded from her body. It hit the soldiers, throwing them back with force. The Emperor took a step back, his eyes wide in disbelief. You, he said, his voice shaking. You never understood me, Jira replied, her eyes flashing with the power of her ancestors. But you will. In that moment, everything changed. The princess was no longer a symbol to be controlled. She was a force to be reckoned with. And this was just the beginning. The flight of the crippled queen. The storm inside her didn't fade. It was stronger now, fiercer, raw. Jira stood before her father, her mind racing, The shockwave had thrown the soldiers back, but the Emperor had only stepped back, his expression darkening with disbelief. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't the way things were supposed to go. "You've made a grave mistake," the Emperor said, his voice thick with venom, his eyes burned with fury. "This ends today. You will bow before me, Jira, and this human will die." But Jira didn't flinch. She was done being afraid. Done being a prisoner of bloodlines. Done being a token of power. This time, it was her power on display. Her body thrummed with energy, with the storm that her family had hidden for generations, the storm that had been locked away inside her. She took a deep breath, and in that breath, the world around her changed. The Emperor's eyes widened as the ground shook. The walls trembled. The air hummed with the force she was unlocking. "You won't win this, Jira," he hissed, raising his hand. "I am your Emperor. You will obey me." But the storm inside, her cracked. The stone floor beneath her feet splintered. The walls cracked open. With one command, her power threw the Emperor's guards across the room like rag dolls. Elian stepped forward, his voice low, but filled with warmth. "They'll come for us." Jira turned to him, her face full of resolve. "Then let them come." With one final push, she unlocked the escape routes. The palace, which had once been a cage, now opened up into the underground tunnels. They were running out of time. As they fled, the palace alarms blared in the distance, signaling the entire empire that a princess, his princess, had defied him. The first flight of the crippled queen had begun. They made their way through the secret tunnels beneath the city, passing old rooms, abandoned chambers, and pathways long forgotten. Jira had memorized these routes as a child. Now, they would be their escape. The silence between them was thick, full of thoughts and heavy breaths. But their connection was undeniable. They had both seen it, the rebellion, the future. The Empress had lost control, and now Jira was ready to take the first steps toward her true destiny. "Where will we go?" Elian asked, turning to her as they reached the hidden shuttle bay. "Wherever we must," Jira replied. "But first, we gather allies." The shuttle's engines hummed to life. They flew into the dark night sky, leaving the palace behind. But the world outside was just as dangerous. Imperial warships were already en route to track them down. They were free for now, but the galaxy was not yet ready for what they had started. Far above them, in the Empire's heart, the Empress clenched her fists. "She will pay for this," the Empress growled. "And that human, he will suffer first." But Jira had made a promise. "This ends with me," she whispered to herself, watching the stars as the shuttle pierced the atmosphere. The stars were quiet now, but not for long. Whispers of war and love, the shuttle cut through the stars like a blade. Jira sat silently, her fingers resting on the cool metal surface, her mind far from the galaxy's vastness outside. Each light passing by felt like a reminder of everything she had lost and everything she was about to gain. Beside her, Elian glanced out the window, his expression thoughtful. "You've been quiet," he said softly. "What's on your mind?" Jira didn't look at him, but her voice was steady. "This will not be easy. We've made enemies across the galaxy, and the Empire won't forgive me. Not this time." She felt his eyes on her. "I never thought it would be easy," he replied, his tone calm but firm. "But we have something they can't take away." "What's that?" she asked finally, looking at him. "The truth." The journey was long, silent. Jira and Elian passed through dark sectors of space, bypassing Imperial patrols, carefully choosing the stars they traveled toward. They reached the outer rim, a barren, cold stretch of space where few would risk chasing them. Here, in the shadows of forgotten worlds, they found what they were looking for. A few days later, they arrived at a decaying station, once a hub for rebellion. Now it was nothing more than a crumbling memory, but deep within its walls lay something far more important, an alliance. Jira and Elian walked into the dimly lit chamber, the door sliding open to reveal a council of rebels. No grand speeches, no banners, only a few men and women, faces marked by time and war. Their eyes were tired, but their spirits were unbroken. "This is where it begins," one of them said, a tall, scarred woman with short black hair and fierce eyes. She stepped forward, holding out her hand to Jira. "You are the storm we've been waiting for." Jira took the woman's hand, feeling the weight of the words. She didn't need their trust. She had earned it. But there was no time to settle. The Emperor had eyes everywhere. The rebellion had to move fast. The council gathered around a holographic map showing the Empire's most vulnerable planets. "These worlds are loyal to you," said the black-haired woman, "but the Empire won't let you keep them. They know you're alive." Jira stared at the map. Her empire, her home. But was it still her home? "We will strike first," she said quietly. "We'll show them we're not hiding anymore." The rebels weren't alone in this. An unexpected force had come to their aid. "They're here," a man from the council said, looking out the window. The Arcturians. A massive ship appeared from the dark, a relic from an ancient war. Its hull was scarred from years of battle, but it was still alive, pulsing with energy. The Arcturians were a race of warriors, fierce and proud. They had fought the Empire long ago, and they had never forgotten their battles. Their leader, a tall man with golden eyes and silver armor, stepped down from the ship, flanked by his guards. "You've come?" Jira said, her voice betraying a hint of surprise. "Why?" The Arcturian leader nodded. "Because you've made the right choice. The Empire has forgotten us, but we will not forget you." He stepped forward and handed her a blade, a sword forged from the rarest metal in the galaxy. "You'll need this when the time comes," he said, his voice low but filled with power. "The Empire's grip is tightening, and we will be with you when you strike." The rebellion was growing stronger with each passing day. But Jira could feel the storm inside her building. She had made a choice, and it was a choice the Empire would regret. Meanwhile, far away in the heart of the Empire, the Emperor paced in his private chambers. His mind raced, the rebellion growing more powerful with every report. "She will not escape me," he growled. "She's only one princess." But his advisors were quiet. They had seen the reports too. Jira was not just a princess anymore. She was a queen in the making, and the Emperor's enemies were rallying behind her days past. Jira spent her time training with the Arcturians, learning the ways of battle and strategy. But there were still moments when she couldn't forget the pain in her legs, the betrayal she had suffered, the scars that marked her skin and her soul. Elian was always beside her, not as a protector, but as an equal. And in those quiet moments when they stood side by side, she knew something deep inside her had changed. She wasn't the broken heir anymore. She wasn't their princess. She was her queen. A new day dawned on the Arcturian ship. They were preparing for war, the final war that would either free them or destroy them. "We attack at dawn," Jira said, her voice steady. "The Empire won't see us coming." But just as the council began their final preparations, a transmission came through, one that would change everything. "It's from the Emperor," one of the rebels said, his voice strained. "He wants to speak to you." Jira's face darkened as she pressed the button to accept the message. The Emperor appeared on the screen, his face cold, his eyes filled with rage. "You think you can escape me?" he hissed. "You think a Y human can save you?" "No," Jira replied, her voice calm, unwavering. "I think you never understood the power of a woman who has nothing left to lose." The screen went black, and Jira knew the Empire was coming for her. But this time she wouldn't be running. This time, they were coming to face her. The storm they tried to silence. The Emperor's fleet filled the stars. His ships, massive, cold and unstoppable, moved like shadows through space, their weapons powered, their engines roaring. They were coming for Jira. But this time, they weren't just coming for a princess. They were coming for a queen on the Arcturian ship, Shira stood at the command center staring at the holomap. Her fingers traced the blinking points where the enemy ships were heading. "They've already made their move," she said, her voice calm but carrying the weight of everything they had fought for. "They'll be in range within an hour." Elian stood beside her, eyes locked on the map. His presence was steady, grounding her as always. "We can't fight them all head-on." "We don't need to fight them all," Shira replied. "We need to make them think we're weak." Her eyes flashed with a knowing light. "And then, we destroy them." Meanwhile, on the Emperor's flagship, the air was tense. His advisors, once confident, now feared the consequences of underestimating his daughter. She had become more than they could control, more than they could break. "She has no fear," the Emperor muttered, staring out the viewports at the vast emptiness of space. "That is her greatest mistake." The plan was set. They would lure the Empire's ships into a trap. The Arcturians had built secret tunnels under the moon's surface, a natural hideout from the Empire's sensors. Shira and Elian knew the risks. This could be their only chance. As the fleet neared, Shira stood in the cockpit of their hidden ship, her gaze fixed on the stars. She felt the weight of the coming battle, but more than that, she felt the power within her. The storm inside her that no one could control. It had always been there. It was hers now. "Are you ready?" Elian asked, his voice steady. His hand was resting on the console, fingers twitching in anticipation. Shira turned to him. "I have no choice," she said. "But this time it will be different." He stepped forward, placing his hand on hers. "I'm with you, Shira. Always." The first shot came from the Emperor's flagship. It struck their ship's outer defenses, sending a shockwave that rattled the hull. Alarms blared. The crew scrambled to respond, but Shira didn't flinch. She was already moving. The Arcturians fired their hidden cannons, launching a series of devastating blasts at the enemy ships, tearing through shields like paper. The fleet recoiled, trying to regroup. But Shira wasn't done. "Now," she commanded. The moon split, open. From beneath its surface, hidden fighters burst out, catching the Emperor's fleet off guard. Their ships were too large, too slow to react to the sudden onslaught. Shira's fleet attacked with precision, targeting weak spots, destroying key systems with a series of expertly calculated shots. It was a battle like no other, a fight between the past and the future. The Empire had underestimated her. "They're retreating," Elian said, looking at the readouts. "They're breaking apart." But Shira could feel the shift. "No," she whispered, her eyes narrowing. "This is only the beginning." As the last of the Empire's ships retreated, Shira received a message from the Emperor. His face appeared on the screen, cold and furious. "You think you've won, Shira?" he sneered. "This was never about you." She stepped forward, her eyes burning with a fury that matched his. "It's always been about me, and you were never strong enough to see it." The Emperor's hand clenched. "You were always a failure, Shira. Always the weakling. You're nothing without me." Shira's laughter filled the room, chilling in its intensity. "I am nothing without you," she repeated, her voice low. "I am everything because of you." The storm inside her raged, the power she had inherited now fully unleashed. The Emperor's ship began to shake. His eyes widened. But just as the final blow was about to land, a new signal came through. The voice was familiar. But it was not the Emperor's father, said a new voice, softer, more controlled. A figure appeared on the screen, her older brother. Once loyal to the Emperor, now part of the Empire's fading past. The Emperor stared in disbelief. "You dare?" But the son, once obedient, now stood in defiance. "It's over, father," he said simply. "The Empire dies today." The Emperor's face twisted with rage. "No, you will not betray me," he screamed, but the signal cut off. Shira turned to Elian. Her voice was calm, but inside, a weight had lifted. "The Empire is fractured." She felt the change. The storm. Inside her was no longer a burden. It was her power. The final battle was won, but the war was not over. They would rebuild. They would rise. The galaxy would never be the same again.